Go.
This is Sarah Kline and Matt Nihan here with Bob Chantler and Curt Houghton, and they're going to tell us their stories from World War II.
Thank you, Sarah. My name is Bob Chantler, and this is my buddy Curt Houghton. And I'll start off with you. You're going to ask the questions, and I'll give you my answers, and then Curt will give you his.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, to start off, question number one. Why did you join the service?
Because I wanted to get at those suckers, and I really wanted to get at them bad, so bad that I badgered my parents for all summer long. I hadn't finished high school yet, and I went in at the end of my junior year. And I hated them, you know. It was just a time when they attacked Pearl Harbor, and the country was in a fury.
Yeah. And how old were you at the time?
Well, I was 16 at that time when I signed up, but I was 17 actually when I went in. The day I went in, I was 17.
Yeah.
You're lucky you get your mother to sign over for you, your father.
Like my father to sign over for me. My mother was very much opposed to it, but I promised her I would finish high school when I came home, and I did.
That's good.
Next question.
Okay. What were you doing with your life before the war started, before you joined the service?
Well, I was in high school, and I was working in an A&P store.
Yep.
Grocery store.
Yeah.
And I earned a few dollars. I think I got $17 a week for working in a store.
Now, I was the same way. I mean, my mother, I badgered my mother. I said my father was in. See, my dad had been in from 1920 to 28, and he came out, and because he'd married my mother, and they had me at the time, so he came out and he had a trade. He was a printer in the Navy. He came out as a first-class printer. And so when the war came along, he got a telegram one day from the Navy Department. They asked him if he'd be interested to coming in. This was 1942. And he said yes, because they needed experienced men to train other men at the time, and they didn't have very much of that. So he went back into the Navy, and that's all I heard all my life growing up. My father was in the Navy. He told Navy story. So I badgered my mom, and I said, look, Mom, I don't want to be in the Army. I don't want to be a soldier. I'd rather be a sailor like Dad. So she finally reluctantly let me sign for me. My father was already in, and my dad came home and took me down to the recruiting station. He knew the recruiter down there in New Haven, Connecticut. So I got in, and for the same reason he did, I wanted to get at the Japs too, the same way. And I was in my junior year at the time, and I just left high school because everybody was going at that time, and there were just mostly girls left in the class. And I didn't want to be the only one that
I think that was a good reason to
alone.
stay.
I figured I'd get overwhelmed anyway by the girls, but
that's
anyway, I went in and I was sent to Great Lakes Naval Training Station.
Yep.
There were 100,000 of us at that time on the base.
He asked that question later.
Yeah, it was amazing,
Right.
amazing, all Navy.
That's right, yeah.
And, you know, we took it from here. But go ahead with your next.
All right. And well, we all know now what branch of the service are you in? The Navy, obviously.
United States Navy.
Right.
Good.
Yes.
The best.
And how did your parents feel about joining the service? It seems like they were actually they were for it. Right?
I think that my mother was mightily opposed to it. She
Oh,
didn't
really?
want her little boy, Bobby, going to into
Well,
any war. And she had a brother that was in World War I. And my father had a younger brother who was also in World War I as a Marine. My father was married at the time, and my sister was little. And he couldn't get into service, and I think he always regretted it, and that's why he would let me go. So that's how I
Oh,
managed to go there.
good. I got into private, you know, for the same reason. I wanted to hurry up and get this war over, be part of it.
Yeah, but
And,
one thing I forgot,
I don't want to be left behind like the, you know, a lot of them didn't go into service because they, you know, they're physically unfit
yeah.
well, that's
to go in
true.
at the time.
I wanted to get in and shoot at them. I wanted to combat. I didn't want anything else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But somebody didn't tell me that they shot back. And they did, and they were not bad either.
Right. Oh yeah. No.
So when you signed up, where did they send you first?
After what?
When you signed up for
Your
the
boot
Navy,
camp.
where
Boot
did
camp.
they send you?
Great Lakes Naval Training Station.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's out in Wisconsin. Yeah, right on Lake Michigan. We were out rowing in a boat between ice flows in February. Yeah, they were training us. It was crazy. It was frozen to death out there in a boat. And I think there were 6 of us rowing this big boat in between ice flows.
I was there in better weather, I think, than you were. I wasn't in where he was, but I was in upstate New York in Sampson Naval Base, Naval Training Base. And by that time, they cut the training from 16 weeks to 12 to 10 to 4, finally down to about 4 or 5 or 6 rather, weeks.
They wanted to get us in
They really
fast.
needed us out there.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, they were after us to get out there. And when you first go in, you're barber bait.
Yep.
Then after you get your hair cut, you're shark bait. Right?
Yes,
Makes sense.
that's
yeah.
another story.
Yeah. Well, how was the culture shock of going to the boot camp and meeting people from all over the country? What was that like?
I didn't recognize any culture shock
Yeah.
at all. I'm sure there was one guy there that was from, I don't know, the hills of Vermont and fuzzy hair and so forth, but they scrubbed him down
Yeah.
in the shower with these big brushes and so forth. They got him clean finally. But other than that, we just seemed to form a group right away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
They were your family all of a sudden. You're homesick as a devil.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But so be it.
Yeah.
You weren't going to resign, say I quit, I'm going
Yeah.
home.
Yeah. Well, I had an unusual experience. After I got through boot camp, I got what they call military police duty into Chicago. And you had time off. You do one day and the next day you had off. And I was walking across the drill field. Now mind you, there was 100,000 of us on that base at that time. And this officer was coming the other way, so I saluted to him like that. He returned the salute. I was telling Bob about it. And we both stopped and turned around. He says, I know you. He had been my gym teacher in middle school.
Wow.
Wow.
And he said, what are you doing? And I said, well, I'm waiting a ship, sir. And he said, would you be interested in service school? And I said, I didn't know such a thing existed. We weren't told, of course. And he said, I'll tell you what, he said, come down to my office. And he was in charge of the service schools out there at the time. He's a full lieutenant. So I went next morning, I'll never forget it, 0800, he says, I got 2 openings. He says, one is cooks and bakers. Well, I didn't think I wanted to be in the kitchen, hot kitchen on the ship. So he said, the next one, he says, electrical school, would you be interested in that? I said, that sounds like I'd be interested in that. I said, so he said, I'll tell you what, he said, we'll sign you up, we'll get your papers all together. He says, you're going to Iowa State College. It means Iowa, for 4 months. Wow, I had my own room, agricultural college. We had all the milk and ice cream and food was marvelous. The only thing was you had cornfields all around you.
Yeah.
You couldn't see anything else but cornfields. So I put my 4 months in there, and then I got assigned to a ship, but not right away.
Okay.
They sent me to Norfolk, Virginia, from there on a Pullman car, and I had my own compartment.
Wow. Yeah.
I never had this before.
Yeah.
My God, I was treated royally. But when I got to Norfolk, that was another story.
Yeah.
They put me in Quonset huts. The pot-belly stove on one end and pot-belly stove on the other end with 50 men. That wasn't pleasant. And I was there for about a month and a half before I finally got my ship.
Yeah.
But you go through those things.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all part of it.
So, do you have any interesting stories you want to tell while you were in basic training?
Sure. Yes, sir. My cousin came over to see me. He had just gone through boots, and he was in OJU, which is outgoing unit, OGU, outgoing unit.
Yeah.
And he was assigned to a destroyer in the Atlantic. He wanted to know why in the world I signed up. He thought I was foolish. He was an older cousin. And I said, should I have waited for the draft and gone in the Army? He said, no, I guess you did the right thing. But then they gave me a test for sound, for hearing. You'll notice it's very good now. And apparently it wasn't too bad because they decided I was to be a sonar man. And there was a different, you needed to be able to sell tones and the different Doppler effects and so forth.
Right.
And they sent me to Key West, Florida, which was pretty neat in the wintertime. And, but the winter didn't last, or the summer didn't last long enough down there, because after that was over with, they sent me up to Norfolk, Virginia, and I went through destroyer training up there. And that was a nightmare. They didn't realize we were coming. We got in the middle of the night. They had a truck pick us up in the middle of the night, and by the way, this is winter.
Wow, yeah.
And all our gear hadn't arrived yet. And they took us into the base. Some guy was on duty, but the officer of the deck wasn't there. He was off somewhere else, where he probably shouldn't have been. And they finally issued us a blanket and sent us up to a Quonset hut. Well, these things didn't even have heat in them.
Yeah.
We almost froze to death. And finally, they assigned us to a barracks, and it was a wonderful barracks. And we were there for 3 days. And then pretty soon this roster appeared on the bulletin board, and this was the exciting part about it. This is where they assigned us to a destroyer. And I was assigned to the 663, it was a number, just a number then, 663. And we were directed to go to a certain area of the lot out there, a big area. And we find this big sign that said 663, and we were to muster there. And then what they did when we got there, they marched us, guess where? Back to the Quonset huts. And these things were miserable.
Yeah.
They were
awesome.
We didn't have a heating stove at the end of each unit. We had one in the middle. It was in a box of sand. And of course the oil capacity wouldn't last all night long. Well, they put me in with a couple of pretty salty characters. And these guys used to literally throw me right out the door in the morning to go get the oil.
Yeah.
Well, I got out of that in a hurry. I went with somebody I was more compatible with.
Yeah, good.
But even the places where you went to wash up, it was just cold and it was not comfortable.
Yeah.
Then you'd have to muster out there in the front in the morning and you'd go off to breakfast. Chow.
Yep.
Which wasn't bad, it was pretty good. And after about 5 or 6 weeks of that training, we boarded a troop train to come to Boston. And the officer in charge of us turned out to be a friend of mine later on in life, Gus Brady. And he was also our gunnery officer on board the ship. And Gus was eager for us to get off the train in South Station and march like sailors up the street to the Fargo building.
Yeah.
Well, we weren't interested in that. We were waving at the girdles and everything. And we were having a ball, and
Yeah.
poor Gus was very disappointed in us. 2 nights in Fargo building, we went down to see the ship, and I never saw anything so beautiful in my life. It was home.
Yeah.
But it was also a terror. It was a beautiful thing, but you could tell it was a warship.
Yes.
And they hadn't finished it yet. There were still some accommodations that had to be put on this thing. So they still had some work to do. But nonetheless, it was a warm place, and it was a great place to be. And the food was good.
Well, the same thing almost happened to me too. While we were waiting the ship in Norfolk for quite a while, I got sick and tired of the life there. It wasn't really nothing to do, you know. We were just more or less hanging around and waiting for the ship to be finished. So finally, I decided this weekend there was a place called Little Creek, Virginia, where you could get a ferry. and you were not supposed to go a radius of 30 miles. You could go on what they call Liberty, 30 miles, all right? You're not supposed to go, that's what you had your pass for. Well, this day I said, I'm going home. So that's New Haven, Connecticut. So how I did it, I went down to Little Creek, Virginia. I got on a ferry, and I saw a pretty good sized truck. It was like an 18-wheeler. And I asked the truck driver if I could hide in the truck, and he told him why. He said, I'll take you up as far as New York. And he says, from there on, he said, that's as far as I'm going. He says, I have to deliver the goods that I have. Well, there was military police on the ferry. If I got caught, I'd be in a brig, which is jail.
Be there yet?
Yeah. So, I got in the truck, put me in back, and I got fined. So he said, I'll take you up to New York City. He says, from there on, you're on your own. So I rode with him all the way to New York City. So I got to New York City. It was still night. So somehow or other, I don't know, I got the train, got on the train. I had to be careful because the shore patrol on the train too. So I called my dad. He was stationed in White Plains, New York. And they had different stamps they give you at that time for gas. Well, he knew several fellows, so he had extra gas. Okay. Remember those stamps?
Yeah, I sure do. They were,
Well, Dad had extra stamps, so he came and picked me up.
Sugar?
And he took me up to White Plains. And then from there, I took the car home to New Haven. His car. I didn't have a driver's license. Okay, I didn't get my driver's license till I was 21. Okay, so I drove to New Haven. And he said, leave the car there. He said, I'll come home and pick it up later. So, okay, I had to be back for Monday morning muster at 8 o'clock. All right, this is the weekend now. I stayed home with my mom, and I finally got down to the railroad station, New Haven, and I said, this isn't going to be fun. I was hiding in the Johns on the train. The shore patrol will go back and forth. If they caught you, you were in trouble. I've been AWOL. So we got to Washington, D.C., and now where do I go from here? I got to get down to Norfolk. So there were a bunch of guys who were doing the same thing, sailors, okay? We pooled our funds together and we hired a limo. And we all got in the limo, and we got down, I'd say about 15 minutes, 20 minutes before muster. He took us right to the gate.
Wow.
Right to the gate. And I think it cost us $10 a piece from Washington down to Norfolk at that time. But I never got caught.
That's real good.
Yeah. And finally, like he said, I got up to my ship.
Yeah.
Later on. The ship was commissioned on Thanksgiving Day, November 24th, 1943. And I had my dad aboard the ship. As a matter of fact, he was the first one to sleep on my bunk. He had a nap that afternoon. And we were commissioned there, where we had a lot of work to do, supplies and all that. It was right next to Missouri, which was not completed yet.
Oh, yeah.
Battleship Missouri. Finally, we got ourselves underway, and I spent Christmas in Bermuda from there. On a shutdown cruise, but I almost lost my life on the way. I came out on the main deck and in raging gale. We were doing 36 knots, which is about 43 miles an hour. And a wave caught me, carried me down, I would say roughly 100 feet down the deck. And the only thing that saved me were the 20mm mounts that were down on fantail. I hit those going down.
Excuse me, there's a point to be made here. On a Fletcher-class destroyer, which we were on, to go from aft, your bunk aft, forward, you had to come topside, up on the deck.
Yeah.
There was no passageway up through the middle of the ship.
Below, yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
And it got pretty scary sometimes.
to go on top deck to.
That's exactly right,
Yeah.
really strong. I went up over the torpedo tower tubes
Yeah.
once, and I thought I was gonna be a gunner.
Wow.
Yeah.
But Kurt's right, that's a take.
But that was in our ship's record too. And because then when I came to my senses, I got up fast, I went up on the second deck. There's a ladder on both sides, port and starboard. You can go up. I think it's the number 4 gun mount that's up there at that time. There's a 5-inch right down on the deck, right on the aft. Number
And that
5
was-
gun,
Yeah, there was a 5-inch, number
Yeah.
5 was on the
Yeah.
deck.
right,
Number 4, there was a ladder that you could go
Yeah,
up. That's
you
what
go
I did, I went up the same ladder.
yeah. Did you? Yeah, well, I got up there fast, and that's really, I was lucky that I didn't go overboard. Because nobody would have heard me in a raging gale.
Oh, no way. Yeah.
No. They wanted to see what the ship was made of. And that's what they do, they put it through its paces,
Yeah.
you know, and then we survived. And we finally got to Bermuda, but we missed Bermuda by 40 miles. Going right by it, we didn't even know it. Yeah, and of course the
Okay.
captain was not too happy with the navigator.
Oh, yeah.
I bet not.
40 miles, that's a pretty good distance.
Yeah.
They were at some
Yeah,
it's
very,
Comes a little
uh,
closer than that.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's awful,
but he got his act together, the navigator did finally.
Good.
Yeah,
Better.
He never stopped to ask directions, and
Yeah.
men are famous for that, right?
Yeah. Didn't stop at a gas station to ask.
that was the
directions.
laugh of the crew. Oh, we got a big charge out of that. We missed our destination by 40 miles.
Wow.
We, what else do you have there?
Next, what were your occupational specialties while in the Navy?
My specialty was, I told you I was going to sonar school training, so I was a sonar man. I operated the sonar gear, and they were specially equipped to hunt for submarines, below surface contacts. And there were 9 of us, sonarmen. And I was a rated sonarman. In other words, I was a 3rd class petty officer. So I was in charge of one of the watches. There were 3 watches. And we alternated, of course. And there was 2 specialties there. One was operating the sonar gear, and one was operating the sound recorder, which is the thing that told you when to drop the depth charges on the contact that you had. And that was my job, to specialize on that, drop the charges.
So you know,
It was a thrilling experience.
yeah.
I only did it once.
So just a question about that. You can set the depth charge to a certain depth to explode, right? So through the sonar you can know how through the beeps.
No.
and blips.
I wouldn't know. That was the judgment factor, and I wouldn't
really?
judge that.
Yeah.
You could tell how old your contact was, how deep that they could go. And they did sink a submarine, but we brought up oil, but I don't think we got the submarine. 'Cause they can tell you after the war which one you got.
Yep.
Believe it or not, the Japanese would tell you. But anyway, when we did drop charges, that was, God, it went through my mind that there's 60, 80 guys down below there hoping the hell I miss,
Yeah. Yeah.
which I probably did. But it was an experience.
Yeah.
That was my duty station.
Yeah.
My battle station was back on the fantail, and I was on guns 27.
Oh, gracious.
Really?
It was a 20 millimeter cannon.
20
Yeah.
millimeter, yeah.
There were 3 of them back there.
Was that an anti-aircraft weapon?
Yeah, it
Yeah,
was.
the aircraft had
It
to
was
be
a pop gun,
practically on top of
practically.
you by the time you could hit it with the 20 millimeters.
What we had on board that ship, we had 5-inch 38 cannons, or rifles, really, rated rifles. We had 5 twin mount 40 millimeter AA guns. And I think there were 7, right? Yeah, 7, there had to be, I was on 27. 7 20 millimeter guns, 10 torpedoes, and of course the ash cans for depth charges.
Yeah.
We were armed to the teeth, boy. And we could put the fear of life into if we got close enough to a big ship
Yeah.
with those torpedoes.
Yeah.
After they started working.
Yeah.
Beginning of the war, they didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
You knew that, didn't you?
No, they had a
I
big
remember
problem.
you talking about it, yes.
Yeah.
How they weren't
Yeah,
working,
I
the
got-
tubes
The
weren't working.
Japanese had the best torpedoes.
Yeah.
Long toms,
Yeah.
Long lance, they call
long
them.
lance, that's right, long
Yeah,
lance.
long lance. They were very accurate too,
Really?
yeah. We finally got our act together though and got our torpedoes straightened out, but it was quite a while. The subs would go out, our subs would go out there and shoot and nothing would happen.
Really?
Yeah, they're like duds.
Yeah.
Yeah, they wouldn't go off. They'd hit the ship, but they wouldn't go off.
They just bounce off or something?
Yeah.
That was a disappointment to them.
Yeah, I bet.
Then they had to run for their lives,
Yeah.
but they,
That's too bad, yeah.
we lost 52 submarines in World War II.
Really?
They had the biggest rate of, fatality rate
Yeah.
of any individual service.
Must have been scary to be a submariner then.
Well, I didn't wanna be on one.
No.
Curt wanted to be on one, but I didn't wanna be
I
on
did.
one.
Yeah.
I volunteered when I was in service school, and there were two of us, a good friend of mine was in service school together, and he and I volunteered. So it came time, they picked him, and I was the next one, and they said, that's it. They didn't, so I didn't go.
Mm.
But he went, and I didn't hear from him again
Really?
until we were in San Francisco after the war. I met him by accident in San Francisco. We sat down on the bench and talked
Wow.
for several hours
Yeah.
about our experiences, and boy, did he see
Yeah.
what he went through. I went through a lot,
Uh-huh.
and so did him.
Yeah.
But what he went through on the sub was unbelievable.
Wow.
When do you get to the war? Should we go to war?
Yeah.
Sure.
Do we want to hear Curt's description of his job?
Yeah.
Um,
Talk about how your your occupational specialty on the ship.
Well, like I said, I was trained in Pearl Harbor. I went to firefighter school for 2 weeks while we were in Pearl Harbor for a refit.
Yeah.
And we did everything. They had asbestos suits, you put them on, and we had to go in this, they set this brick building, concrete building. They had all pipes all through it, and it was spray gasoline. And they'd light that, and you had to go into that building. And taught you how to use the hoses with very fine spray to put out gasoline fire.
And this is a guy that didn't want to be a cook or a baker.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I had the asbestos suit on, and then we had this big tank, water tank. Oh God, it was huge. And we had a platform all around it, like that. You could stand on it. And they would light it. They put, I guess it was gasoline and so on a surface, and they'd light the whole thing. It was like that. We had to get up on the platform, and with a very fine spray, put that fire out. So we did that every day. We'd go back to the ship, then come the next day, do the same thing, and sat in classes and learned about firefighting equipment and how to run this. And we had handy billies. Remember the handy billies on the ship?
Yes, I do. They didn't work sometimes.
Ours did.
When we got hit, they didn't work.
Yeah. What they would do is they put pressure. You hook the hose up one end, and the other end you
Big pump.
Yeah.
to put fires out.
That's a
Well,
handy bit.
all my training, we never got hit.
Yeah.
But I did get to use it. That's a later story.
Okay.
On one ship, I had to go aboard with a fire hose. It was in pretty bad shape. But then, when I wasn't doing that on the ship, I was in an electrical gang.
Mm.
And we did various jobs on the ship, like climb the mast, put
Yeah.
radio antennas up,
Cool.
and so on the yard arm. It's about 4 inches wide. Only you do that in port, not underway.
Yeah.
Do that in port because the ship is like this on
Yeah.
the way. So
That's if you fall, so we can find you.
I hated that job. I hate heights anyway.
Oh.
Yeah, going up. That's pretty high.
That'd be scary.
How high was the mast of the ship? Do you remember?
What?
How high was that mast of the ship?
Pretty high,
It was very high.
yes,
Yeah.
but I don't remember how high.
No, we put antennas along the yard on.
As far as I'm concerned, it was never measured, but it's up there. The Newcomb lost her mast when she got hit with the kamikaze. It came crashing down on the guys. Oh, God.
Did you witness that? You witnessed that?
Yes,
You saw it happen?
yes. Yes, we went over to pick the survivors up.
Mhm.
But that's the latter part of the war. She was our squadron commander.
But go ahead,
Alright, so we can get into some war questions now if you want.
Oh, that's the meaty part.
All right.
I'm gonna tell you something, fella.
Yeah,
It ain't gonna be pretty.
okay.
yeah.
There's only one way to get I've had people come to me and say, what was the war really like? I said, I can't tell you what the war was really
I
like.
bet, yes.
And the reason you can't tell you, because you can't make it smell like a war.
Yeah.
For the wire.
Okay.
Okay. Our first operation, when we came out to Pearl Harbor, we were initiated into the 54th Destroyer Squadron. Desron 54, they called it. And we went through a lot of gunnery practice out there and so forth, so we got ready to go and did some training on the sonar simulators and so forth. And eventually and I told you about the explosions that went on out there. Geez, that's sad. Anyway, in the first part of June, we left and we went up to Ulithi. No, that's not right. We went to Enewetak. And Enewetak was one of the first islands, and you may have heard of it later on. It was a place where they did the atom bomb.
Oh, okay.
But it was a little island, not a very big island. And but the ships had all grouped there. And on this particular invasion going to Saipan, we did not go with the attack group. There was an attack group that always went down with warships. And they used to soften the place up, bombard it and so forth. So we were escorting the troop ships down. And it was very precautious because, oh, you had to stick with it, particularly the sonar, because if those troop ships got hit with a torpedo, a lot of guys were going to go down with it.
Yes.
So we were very serious about that. And that's where I had an experience. I was on the sonar gear, and I got a contact, an echo, and reported it right away, gave the bearing and so forth. We were discharged to go over and investigate. We got over there, and I heard people wing at the bridge laughing. Oh, I wonder what they're laughing at. I heard this captain say, "Who's on the sonar?" I heard, "Oh boy, I'm sunk." They said, "Chantler is, so you should get him out here." Oh, no, out there. I had pinged on all these, there was about the size of half this room right here, fish just boiling in the water. And I picked them up. And I looked at the captain, I said, "Sir, I'm sorry, but they came in pretty sharp." He said, "No, son, you're not sorry. You did your job and you did it well."
Huh.
Well, I guess I puffed up. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Good then.
Anyway, we went back, and finally we arrived at Saipan, and I'm very excited at this. This is our first entry into combat. God, I was excited. I want to get at those suckers. And it was the biggest disappointment of my life. They left us outside there to patrol for submarines outside there. And we could just about hear and see the bombardment going on the island. And after 2 or 3 days of that, they finally decided that maybe they ought to test us out a little bit and bring us in to do some shore bombardment. Well, we turned out to be pretty darn good.
Yeah.
Very good. And it all depends upon your main battery director and your fire controlman. And we had the best optics in the world and that kind of thing, but your fire controlman had to have good eyesight, good depth perception. And they were good. They could seal the cave. They put a 5-inch 38 right in the cave.
Wow.
It did. It proved it many times.
Yeah.
We even chased a guy up the road. He was on a motorcycle one
Yeah,
time.
really?
And they finally got him.
Really? Wow.
But we got to be pretty noted for it. And then we went over to Tinian was an island that was just a little ways away. And they could actually use artillery to shoot from Saipan to Tinian. So they decided they wanted the Navy over there to do a little better. So we went over and we did a little bit better, but they almost nailed us over there. Sitting on the ready box, and all of a sudden I heard, the heck is that, Curt?
Yeah. Yeah.
And what it is somebody shooting at you.
Really?
And they're missing you. And boy, we got the devil out of there. We did. We moved. We took another spot and kept shooting. And then one time we were down the coast and we were all alone, but we had this sector. And at night we used to fire star shells, illumination up so that the enemy couldn't infiltrate our lines.
Yes.
During the day, we had targets, and we were working with a Charlie Oboe. He was a guy that was on the shore who would pick targets for us and tell us what sector to shoot in and guide us in. Also, with these little aircraft, light aircraft. Well, this light aircraft flew over and dropped a message streamer down on our deck. And the message streamer said, there's a bunch of Marines that are on a reef down below you about 5 miles away. Go help them. They need help. So we went down there right away, and sure enough, they did need help. They were butchered on that beach. I mean, butchered. And they had been driven back in a bonsai charge that night. And so we couldn't shoot into them. But the Japanese saw us coming, and they decided that it was the better part of valor to depart there, right then and there.
Yeah, yep.
And then we could shoot at them. And I don't know if we got any or not, but at least we drove them off. And we picked up all these guys, 44 of them off the reef. They were a New York State Guard running from upstate New York. And there was one Japanese prisoner. And he had a wound in his leg when he started out, and it was worse than that when he got aboard our ship, because they were trying to beat the tar out of him, but they didn't do it. Anyway, we rescued him. And these fellas, when they came aboard, they were a mess. They didn't have any clothes, they didn't have anything, and they were mad. They could hardly wait to get back at them. Hardly wait to get back. Did you see what happened to Charlie? Yeah, 3 of them jumped in his hole with us, they stabbing him. And this is the way they were talking.
Yeah.
And I have somewhere in my possession a story that one of the sergeants put out. Sergeant Savage was his name, as a matter of fact, about that event. Many years later, when we were having a reunion, I contacted one of them, but he died. He was the only one left. He died before we made the reunion. But so be it. At least he lived a lot longer. But we took those guys back in, took the Japanese prisoner back in, and turned him over to intelligence.
Yeah, good.
And you want to tell your story of Saipan?
Yeah, I think I told a little bit about it earlier, but we had to go in just like he did, close into the beach. That was our first shore bombardment, by the way. And we had, I guess it was a Marine something, an officer that volunteered to spot the pillboxes. And they had the 50 caliber machine guns inside them. They were round like this on the beach, and they were made of concrete, reinforced concrete. And you had to go in pretty close to it.
Play head back. I was just saying play head back.
Is my head in the way?
Yeah.
Just move the chair over. Going pretty close
Sorry.
to the beach, and he would tell you exactly where the pillbox was. Well, we were doing pretty well. We were knocking out a few of them that way. It had to be a direct hit on the pillbox. And pretty soon, we didn't hear from them anymore. They got him. They spotted. So we got to take our chances. In the meantime, we got orders to go further up Saipan because they thought there might be a submarine lurking up there. This is where we got our second one. So we got in, we came flying in close, and now mind you, this water is really deep, and we got a sonar contact. And we went in 25 knots toward the beach, and there were caves, Japanese marine caves, and we knew, they told us to seek cover. The officers did on the ship told us to seek cover. Don't be obvious because they could pick us off. So we went in 25 knots, I'll never forget it, and we dropped depth charges. We didn't know it until after the war that we got the second.
Our old 56.
Yeah. Yeah, matter of fact. Yeah, that's good. We got that second one at that time, but nobody shot at us. No, that was, we tore out of there. Then later on we went down to Tinian, and then finally Guam. We did all three. But I think we got our second shore bombardment in there. Actually, during the whole war, we only got 3 shore bombardments. He had many shore bombardments. We fired 11,000 5-inch shells during the war.
38,000.
He had 38,000.
Wow.
See?
Wow.
But,
More than.
yeah. 40s, we shot, I don't know how many we shot of those. But I remember distinctly 11,000 rounds of 5-inch 38s. But that was, we got credit for Saipan, Tinian, and Guam. And then from there we went to Peleliu. That's what you did too, didn't you, Bob?
Yes, we went to Peleliu.
Peleliu, like,
We,
oh God.
I want to come back to Saipan for a
Go
minute.
ahead.
There's one important thing I forgot to tell you about. I had convinced our officer in charge that I should be helping our mailman out. He was a buddy of mine, and we used to have to go to the beach. We went to the beach on Saipan shortly after right after the Marines had swept through there. And it surprised me because in going ashore, there are still bodies of the Marines, right along the shoreline. And we were pulling them out of the way to get to the beach. And I scooped up a helmet. I told you about it.
Yes.
It was laying, and it had 3 bullet holes right through the crown. No liner, but it had 3 bullet holes, and I just tossed it down. Anyway, we walked down the road. The stench was unbelievable. It was terrible.
Dead bodies all around.
Dead bodies all over the place.
Including our men and
Japanese still in the foxholes, deader than a
floating in the water all around. They used to come by with a boat and just cut the dog tags off. You couldn't even give them a decent burial.
Yeah.
And
But the important thing is we got down there, there was a seaplane base, and that's where the communications were, that we were to pick up. And the Marines were kind of gathered around down there. And they brought the whaleboat down to take us back to our ship. And they wouldn't let us go. They said that they had word that the Japanese were bunching up there up a little ways along the shore to make a banzai charge. Well, we weren't too excited about sitting there watching a banzai charge, but we didn't have much choice. And anyway, sure enough, there was a brief banzai charge, and then they drove the Japanese off and killed some of them. And we got in the whaleboat. By this time, it's getting dusk. And we're going to have a tough time unless we get going to find our ship. So, they could go alongside a cruiser. And we heard them go to general quarters. And we watched this very placidly, and all of a sudden we saw their guns swing out in our direction. So we said, my God, they're going to shoot at us. Well, they were.
Yeah.
So we jumped up, we're waving our hats and shirts and everything else. And finally, the guy with a bullhorn says, you men close in here. There's a word that a midget submarine has got in through the nets. We thought you were it.
wow.
Well, maybe somebody else is going to think that too. We better be alert.
Yeah.
So we finally got back to our ship safe and sound, but it was quite an experience. And then Peleliu, you wanna hear about Peleliu?
Yes.
But one more about cycling. Like he had a chance to go ashore. I didn't. Some of our men did get a chance to go ashore. And one of them retrieved a little puppy, Japanese puppy. And we brought it back to the ship and we named it Saipan. And there's a funny story that goes with it. Of course, cooks are temperamental about their food. You don't criticize their food. And we had a first-class cook on the ship. He's a great guy. He's a good friend of mine and everything. We used to tease him something fierce. And the way we would do it, the first man down into the chow hall would bring some food up for the dog, the food we would eat. And he'd be looking out, the first-class cook would be looking out the galley door to see how the line was going. And so it was moving fast enough and so on. So the man came up with this tray, put it before the dog. Dog will turn around and he wouldn't eat it. Well, that would set the men off. They'd say, "You expect us to eat that crap? The dog won't even eat it." You know, he would get so furious. I saw him one day get so angry, took a cleaver. You know what a cleaver is? Okay, he chased the man down the deck. He was too big. He was too fat, for one thing. He ate too much food. But he chased him down the deck, but he never caught him. But he was so angry that that dog jumped ship one time.
I don't blame him if the food was that bad.
Yeah, the dog jumped ship. And see, we all used to tie up together. There'd be maybe 5 or 6 destroyers, and when you wanted to get on the dock, you had to come across each one of those to get to the dock. Well, the dog somehow got over to the McGowan, the 677. She was in our squadron. Okay? She was in the torpedo run with us.
Peleliu was a battle that never should have been fought.
Yeah.
And I think we all agree to that. Everybody agreed to that afterwards.
We should have
Because it was a
bypassed.
mess. The Army and the Marines collided on that. But we had an individual action there which brought quite a, in fact, there was a story in the newspapers back in the States. And it was, I can tell you the date, 23rd of September, 1944. And we knew, our intelligence knew that the Japanese were reinforcing Peleliu. And they thought they were doing it via submarines. So they sent a destroyer of ours to see what we could put a stop to that. And they threw a few of these little gunboats, LCIs I think they call them.
LCIs.
They went with us. And our captain, Joe Bower, that night he came out of the cabin. He had a sea cabin up there on the bridge. And he looked into, there's a repeater scope on the bridge from the radar. Same thing that they see on the radar secret. And he called down to the radar room, where they call it CIC, Combat Information Center. He said, "I think I see some motion along the chain of islands right there." And they said, "Oh no, so we've been checking that all night long. There's no movement there." I mean, he didn't agree with that, so he went out on the wing of the bridge, and I was on duty that night. That's how I know all this. And I heard him ask, what 5-inch mount is on duty? And I, gun mount 3. He said, "Tell him I want a star shell, illumination." And he gave him the bearings and range and so forth. Boom.
Yeah, that's where it went.
Boy, and there they were.
Light up everything.
These little barges, 14 of them, and they were like ducks, full of ammunition, full of troops, full of whatever they were full of. Boy, and we took after them. We got every one of them. Every single one of them, plus a motor sampan.
Wow.
And some of them blew up.
Yeah.
And the interesting part of that, there's an aftermath of that story. Many years later, a friend of mine who was in the government was in an office that had some cans of film from World War II, training film. And he said, the guy, where are those training films there? And the guy said, oh, those are from World War II. You can have them if you want them. So Art took them, brought them down to the little club he and I belonged to. And he put it on a 16mm projector. And he said, the front end of that one film that he had there was gone. It had been ripped off or something, but the rest of it was there. So I had no title to it. And he said to me, hey, Bob, what island is that? And I looked at it. It was from an aerial view. And I said, geez, I don't know. I'm not sure, but it looks to me like, I guess it could have been Peleliu. Well, it turned out it was Peleliu. And as the film went on, I stood there watching it then, and all of a sudden it said, on the 23rd of September, 1947, one of our destroyers came across a series of barges that were reinforcing Peleliu.
Wow.
And took them all out. And it showed the gunfire from
Yeah.
the beach. We were shooting at
Yeah.
them, and we never saw this kind of thing.
Yeah.
Anyway, then it showed the morning, and you see these barges just
Yeah.
floating around, you know, they were just dead in the water. And the Marines were out there cutting souvenirs off the dead bodies. Marines were coming, or some of them were coming in to give up, and they got chopped down by the Marines. The Marines just shot them, you know, they were easier than taking a prisoner. Anyway, that was a thrill for us. So I had a copy of that made for everybody in the crew.
Oh, good.
And then, Peleliu was just another, we almost got nailed at Peleliu. I told you about that. And what it was, we were on one side of the island, it was narrow. And some battleships were on the other side of the island. Well, they missed the damn island and they overshot it and got us. I was sitting on a ready box. And all of a sudden, kaboom! This geyser of water went up.
Oh, you moved
Then it goes,
out.
Yeah.
what happens with that? It's the air coming back into that big
Yeah.
explosion. It's just pushed all the air out of there.
Yeah.
Boy, did we get out of there in a hurry. And we were mad. We didn't like that.
Yep.
So I was very happy to leave that place.
Oh, that was a close one.
I turned it
We
over
were
to
in,
Curt.
like him, we were in close to the, where the action was going on with the Marines. And I recall going up into the fire patrol director, and they have, well, it's like a telescope. You can sight in on things. And I got in there and looked and watched the Marines going ashore and getting mowed down like flies. Actually, you could see the ridge they were trying, and this is, what's it, like coral, isn't it, or what's the stuff that, it's really tough stuff where they are. And they're holed in these caves, and the Marines are trying to get up there to get them. And they were getting mowed down left and right by the Japanese. And we were opening up on them too, ahead of the Marines, trying to soften them up a little bit. But we had an encounter almost like him. We were out a little bit from the island, and all of a sudden, P-38, a P-38 has got twin bodies on it. And it was one of the fastest planes during World War II. Started to dive on us. And they thought, I guess they must have thought we were Japanese, and it came screaming down. They must have been doing better than 400 miles an hour or more. Down on us, and we signaled instantly on the bridge, and then they just like that, and they waved their wings like this.
We did shoot one down.
Oh my God, we were lucky that time. P-38s were really dangerous, dangerous planes. They were darn good planes too.
Captain Bong flew a P-38.
Really?
Yeah, he had the biggest kill ratio of any air pilot. And you heard of Captain Bong, have you?
No, did he really?
And
Wow.
then he got killed as a test pilot when the war ended.
Yeah. Well, you know, getting back to Peleliu again, this was another experience that was just awful to see. All around the ship would be dead
Bodies.
bodies.
Yeah.
All around.
Floating.
And like,
Yeah.
Floating high in the water.
yeah, and I mean, the stench, oh God, it was awful. I mean, and it just cut the dog tags off. But
It wasn't.
I was so glad to get out of there.
The other thing we saw at Saipan, we saw, you know, there was a big cliff,
Yes,
and the people thought we were gonna be nasty to them, you know,
Yes,
rape their
yes.
women and
Yeah.
kill them and torture them and so forth. I guess they thought that because they were committing suicide. I saw one woman, and we had a gunboat going down with the loudspeaker going on, trying to speak to them in Japanese, saying, please, please don't do that, give up, you know. At least I think that's what they were saying. Maybe they would have saying, jump, jump, go ahead, I don't know. But anyway, I saw a woman walk out into the surf with a baby, turn around and walk back to the beach, pick the baby up, and walk out again, and that was the end of her. She drowned. You could see him jumping right off the cliff,
Yeah.
right?
yeah, they did that too at Okinawa, same thing.
Yeah, Okinawa and Guam. I wasn't at
God,
Guam.
Yes,
but,
oh, it's terrible. I mean, they're all committing suicide, jumping off the cliffs.
in fact, the guy that sat right next to me in high school in social studies class was killed in Saipan,
Really.
Marine.
Marine,
Where do we go from here now?
Did
Well,
Curt, did you have any
from there,
friends?
From Pelado, I think we went to Leyte,
Right.
Philippines.
Yeah.
General MacArthur. By this time, we became a part of MacArthur's Navy, and I didn't like that one bit.
Tell us about that.
Well, he was a very arrogant man.
Yeah.
Seventh
Really?
Fleet, General MacArthur said that's his seventh Fleet.
Yeah,
He was in charge of that.
yeah.
Well, we didn't like that.
Oh,
The Army
neither-
man taking
neither
over
did
the
Halsey.
Navy.
But anyway, we got to there, and it was a very quiet invasion. We, you know, they were on the beach. There was much to shoot at. We did a little bombardment, but we had a few air raids. But it was a very quiet, calm invasion. They were sitting back there waiting for the guys to come ashore, is what they were doing. And so it was so quiet at night, we threw out the hook and anchor. And I presume that was to save fuel, that kind of thing, and put us in a position where we were running around and running into each other, because there were a lot of us there.
Yeah.
And then came the big thing.
Bob, I'm going to
Yeah.
stop you right there for a
Worst night
second
of my life.
because I got to change tapes.
This really is the biggest battle that was ever fought at sea.
In history.
Yes.
In history, and it's the biggest that ever will be. Because, you know, today, I went aboard a ship here a few years ago, the USS Bunker Hill. And she fights her battles from 350 miles.
Yes.
You don't get alongside and slug it
No.
out like they did.
No. You launch a rocket and way.
Yeah, there goes
Yeah.
and it drops it right on that,
Yep.
their target.
Climb to the. Yep. Right on
Boy,
the
I'm glad I'm not in those battles. Where'd that thing come from?
Yeah.
My daughter-in-law's father was on the Bunker Hill.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And we escorted her back when she was hit. That was, he was one of
Well, this
the,
is a new Bunker Hill.
oh, this is the old one, I'm talking
Yeah,
about the
yeah.
old one, yeah. My daughter-in-law's father's,
Oh,
Jim
boy.
Spence, yeah. He was up on the bridge when she was hit.
Well, we got lucky. What we escorted back was an LST at 9 knots. And that's agonizingly slow.
Wow.
We're
yeah,
coming
that
home.
is.
Are we on?
Oh, yep, we're
Back
rolling.
to Saipan?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yes. Hell of a battle. Yes.
Just
Anyway, did you get the part about the ammunition?
start from the beginning of the Ole battle. I apologize.
We had word that the Japanese fleet was coming after us, and it was their last chance. Really, if they knocked us off of the Philippines, that would have extended the war, and they could have had a much better surrender terms if they surrendered at all. At any rate, we didn't have the proper ammunition. Oh, we were shore bombardment, and that was our stuff that we were loaded with. But we went aside a ammunition ship, and we picked off our 15 minutes worth of ammunition. ammunition. And, what do they call that ammunition?
I've forgotten the name of I can't think of it myself.
You're supposed to think of these things.
Well, it's been a few years.
It was
I can't remember.
hard ammunition that when it went in, it penetrated.
Yeah. Armor
You
piercing.
could see it hit, and sparks would fly.
Yeah.
Then there'd be a secondary explosion.
Yeah.
Anyway, we got 15 minutes worth of it.
Yeah.
The next destroyer behind us got their 15 minutes worth of it. And we took our position at the mouth of Lady Go with our squadron. There were 3 sections of our squadron, 9 ships in the squadron. We were section 3, and our skipper was in charge of section 3. That means he'd lead the charge in. Section 2 was the Robinson, she was in charge of that. And then the Newcomb was in charge of section 1. And she was the last one to go in, by the way. I was on watch, on the H-12 watch. The guy who relieved me on watch was never on time in his life except this night. He was on time this night.
Oh, good.
Yeah. What's going on? What's going on? She's not, I didn't hear anything. And I said, but
We were all
well,
excited.
why don't you relieve me and I'll get on and hit the sack? He said, well, I'd like a cup of coffee. And I said, well, okay, I'll get you a cup of coffee. So I went and I got him a cup of coffee. And we sat there and chatted for a few minutes. And I was he was a buddy of mine. He was a great guy, Tobin. And he settled down quite a bit. So I said, I'm going to go out on the bridge and tell the OD that I'm being relieved. As I went out on the bridge, we had what they call a TBS device. It's a radio. Talk between ships.
Okay.
And over that radio came the Chinese talk, or the Japanese talking. And it scared the life out of me. The hackles went right up on the back of my neck, so help me they did.
Yeah.
And so I came back and I said, I think we're in for it.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, our skipper said, sound the general alarm. And I was standing right beside him, and I sounded that thing so many times, just a levering ahead.
Yeah.
And then the bong, 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 and everybody
I
was
hated
taking
that. I
off
could
with
hear
scolded
that.
cats.
About a year after I got out of the Navy.
Really?
Still hear it in
Yeah.
my head, you know.
Bong, bong.
Used to hate
Anyway.
it.
My battle station was back in the fantail on a 20mm cannon. So I hot-footed back there as much quick as I could. Got my life preserver on. Got my helmet,
Yep.
got my gun all loaded and everything.
Good.
And we got ready to do battle. And by this time it was probably around 12:30, something like that. Well, we sat there, and we sat there, and we sat there. And there were a couple of cruisers along, not far away off our starboard side. And I remember them saying, we had a speaker that was information was being passed down from the bridge over the headsets to the speakers. And their speaker was another guy who was part of our 10-man crew down there. And he said, we're going to make this torpedo run. And then a little while later he said, the battle started. And he told us that the torpedo boats had made their run. That the destroyers down the strait were going to make their torpedo run, which they did. You could see the damage this guy was doing down there. You could see the explosions of this darn thing. And it was kind of thrilling to see. But we wanted some of that too.
Yeah.
Anyway, the word came to, well, we're not going to have to go. Well, that was fine. I was a little disappointed, I think. But anyway, all of a sudden, the ship started to tremble. And that does that, boy, when you put her to high speed.
Yeah.
Flank speed. Boy, away we went. And we're going in. Hey, here we go. And the skipper came on the speaker and he said, boys, this is what we've been waiting for. Well, maybe it's what he was waiting for, but it wasn't we were waiting for, okay? But he was quite a skipper. And I swear to God this happened. I swear to this day And as we went down the side of those cruisers, you could hear him say, "Go get him, you guys! Go get him!" And I was so proud.
Yeah,
Well, we went and got
that's
him.
awesome.
Our torpedoes didn't fire
Yeah.
at first. We had a malfunction. And you can see our track, we're going in toward them, and we leveled out like this to fire the torpedoes. They didn't fire, so we went back in. And somebody said, "What's he gonna do, hand them to him?" So we closed the range, and finally we got 4 torpedoes off. The guy behind us got 10, the guy behind him got 5. And the water was just full of torpedoes. They lit us up a star show. And
Yeah.
this is, God, I thought we were gonna die. I really did.
Oh, that was
The
scary.
shells were landing all around us. It was splashed. The water was coming over on us from the shell splashes. One landed in the fantail, lifted the fantail right up. That's where I was, you know.
Wow. Yeah.
And I thought we were going to get hit.
Yeah.
And we scooted out of there and we went behind an island. Well, okay. After you got behind the island, then that panic goes away from
Yeah.
you. You say, "Oh, we're going to live after all." And you begin to breathe naturally. Well, somebody said, "Boy, the Lord was sure with us." Well, somebody else said, "Well, if he was, he had one hell of a ride." So help me God that happened. Well, he did have a heck of a ride.
Yeah.
Anyway, so it started to get a little light. They decided to feed us on stations. They brought around one of these coffee cups to us.
No rebels.
If you're lucky, you got your coffee first and then the beans. If you're unlucky, you got your beans first and then the coffee, all right? And I don't know which I got, but anyway, we
You
ate
make your
whatever
hair
it was
stand
that
up.
we put before us.
The coffee.
And then we were directed to go down with a couple of cruisers to pick off any strays that were down there. So as we were going down, yeah, we spotted this Japanese destroyer, the Ariake. She was off on the left side, our port side, and her bow had been blown off. And there wasn't a soul on board her. The cruisers claimed they were being shot at by her. There was no way they could shoot at her.
Wow.
There wasn't anybody to shoot the damn guns. So the cruisers were gullishing a little bit.
Yeah.
And I know they were. I never had much use for cruisers because they knocked off one of our destroyers.
Really.
And anyway, so we took her under fire and she went down, boy. We nailed her. And I'm glad to see her go. It made me feel good. Then afterward, there were, on the way down there were thousands of Japanese sailors in the water. And they just look at you like they were out there on a Sunday picnic or something like that. And like, you know, they just
They
look
don't
at
want to
you
be
like,
picked
"Oh,
up.
Yeah. No.
and we were supposed to pick up, they asked us to pick up a couple of survivors if we could. We threw out cargo nets and then tried to entice them to come aboard. Come on, fellas. Well, one guy started to come aboard my ship, and I was looking at him, and I thought he was gonna make it up the net. But another guy grabbed him and pulled him down and cut his throat.
Yeah.
And the skipper said, "Shoot that man," and he did. So, that was it. And we sank a whaleboat that was out there too, but there were a lot of wounded, you know, and they were gonna die. They were either gonna drown, be eaten by sharks, or killed by the Hucks. The Hucks were coming out with their machetes, boy, and they were ready to do business. I ran into a soldier years later who was in that same operation, and except he was unplanned, of course, and he said these survivors never made it out of the Philippines. They butchered them.
Well,
Yeah.
the Filipinos would kill them,
Yeah.
but they made it ashore.
The Hucks.
They hated them.
Yeah.
They hated them. And anyway, it was a tough fight. So my skipper, we had word that the Japanese were breaking through Samar. And my commanding officer was mad. He said, "I'll never forget him." And you know who he meant? He meant Bull Halsey. Halsey, meanwhile, had left us. He was supposed to be guarding the entrance to Samar, to the
San Bernardino Street.
San Bernardino Strait. And he left it. He got,
See, that was north of Surigao Street.
he was decoyed away
Huh,
because he wanted to get the aircraft carriers.
That was
We didn't have any
intent.
airplanes on him.
really?
And he fell for that decoy.
Yeah.
That's
All
exactly
he did.
right.
He took everything with him.
Yeah.
Yeah, at
He
the
took
time.
everything and,
He took all the battleships and the carriers and cruisers.
instead of leaving somebody back to
Yeah.
guard the place,
He left Ollendorf, Admiral Ollendorf, in charge of the destroyers.
but that brings another story, because what happened, when they came into Samar, there were three groups of light carriers, baby carriers, which each of them had 4 destroyers and a couple of DEs, destroyer escorts.
Yeah, they ferried the planes out to us.
And that was Taffy 3, Taffy 1, Taffy 2, and Taffy 1. Taffy 3 was the one that encountered the Japanese fleet coming through. And those guys, they turned that entire fleet around, just a few destroyers and a couple
The
of DEs.
destroyers turned that whole Jap fleet around.
They turned that whole thing. And those sailors were saying, "They're getting away, Captain. They're turned around, they're going back." It was terrible. And they sank the destroyers, and these guys were in the water for 3 or 4 days, and they were like sharks. It was it shouldn't have happened. And I have a hate for Admiral Halsey. I don't have any use for that sucker at all.
He should have been court-martialed.
He should have been court-martialed. But you know the reason they didn't? Because they were
Politics.
afraid he was going to give some hope to the Japanese of a better settlement.
It was politics too. Yeah. Admiral King was in charge. But our position here now, in this situation, we were on the other side. And we were closest to the strait, Surigao Strait. So what happened, we brought the 77th Division, General Douglas MacArthur, up about the 20th of October. This all happened from the 24th through the 26th.
Yeah, you're right.
We brought MacArthur in, our ships from New Caledonia. They had a rendezvous there, and we came up and escorted them all up that way, all the troop ships, all the way up to 77th Division, up to Leyte. MacArthur went ashore, all the troops, and we were guarding 3 destroyers. The Remy, McGowan, and I was on the Melbourne. Were guarding this section of troop transports. And word came early in the day, I say early in the day, in the afternoon, that the Japanese fleet part of it had been sighted. And they seemed to be headed toward the Surigao Strait. So we knew that something was going to happen. And like Bob said, I think we had 60 PT boats. Was it that?
There were 38 PT boats.
Yeah. And they went out, and the firepower from these ships coming through Surigao Strait was so intense that the torpedoes, they couldn't even get the torpedoes off.
Oh, you can see the big shells going right over your head.
Yeah, like
Both
that.
ways.
Yeah. So then it was up to us. So we got word that morning, okay, early in the morning, and we started on our run. I can tell you the time. I had phones on, sound-powered phones. I was down by the torpedo tubes.
Yeah, I remember that. You're telling me that.
I was right
What a
under
place
them
to
when they
be.
fired
You
it.
could have ridden those torpedoes in.
Yeah, and I'm telling you, I was never so scared in all my life.
Really?
Because the skipper got on the intercom. I could hear the message over the phones that he expected each man to do his duty to the best of his ability, but I can't promise you we'll return. Wow, powerful words. So we knew we were up against some real tough odds. So at approximately 2:06 in the morning, early morning, we started down towards Saratoga Strait. We weren't far from it. We started at 20 knots, and we slowly increased speed. Now you had the Remy, which was the flagship. It had the squadron commander on it, Captain Coward. Okay, it was a 4-striper. Each one of our destroyers had a 3-striper, was commander, all right? Captain Coward was in charge of us. Then Admiral Ollendorf was the admiral in charge of all of us in that area. So we started down the strait, 20 knots, then 25 knots, 30 knots, finally got up to 36 knots, and we were flying. The sea was like glass. Yeah, we were moving, we were in line. The Remy, McGowan, we were the anchor man, Malcolm. So we got within 11,500 yards of the target. We had them on radar. I think, if I remember, at 19,000 yards. I had all this in my, I could hear it on the phone.
You got good memory.
Yeah, 19,000 yards, and which is roughly 22 miles, okay, at sea. Then we came closer and closer. Finally, by this time, the searchlights, they turned on the searchlights. They knew we were coming. The, begins with an A, Shiguri. Yeah, they picked us up. They picked us up. That was I
He was
learned
the only
that
one that
later.
got out of the whole thing.
Yeah.
It slipped later on.
So then they started to fire at us. They had their searchlights on the Melvin, not on the other two. And we got within 11,500 yards of them. Now the first one was the Remy. She got in position, she fired 10. Okay, that's all we carried, 10 torpedoes. Then came McGowan's turn. Okay, she fired 8, 2 misfired in the tubes. That happens sometimes. Okay, and then came our turn. Our skipper was not happy. He asked permission from the squadron commander to go closer. Closer? My God, how close do you want us to get? By this time, 14-inch shells are dropping around us. Okay, you could hear them going over us like an express train. And drop. Big geysers like that. The cruiser Mogami was with him. It was a heavy cruiser, 8-inch guns. You had the Yamashiro was the flagship. Okay, she was in the lead, the battleship. Then you had the Fuso, which was second in line battleship. Now, these battleships were what, 42,000 tons, something like that?
Big ship,
Yeah, they were
great
big.
big suckers.
They carried 12, 14-inch guns, 16 6-inch guns, and some other type of armament too. Each one of the battle order. They were all firing. So we got within 8,800 yards, a little over 4.5 miles at sea, close to them. We could see them now, and God, the shell, it was getting hot and heavy. There are men in midships passageway on the decks praying. I'm telling you, I was scared. So we started, our torpedo tubes are coming out now, getting in position, and I heard the word, set them for 33 knots, 6 feet down. Okay, right over my head. Set them out, second one, like that, one after the other. One got stuck in the tube, so we fired 9. Now mind you, there were 18 torpedoes in the water heading toward them from the first 2 ships. They all missed. None of them hit. So by this time, the Japanese knew that the torpedoes were in the water, because we were told not to fire any guns, because we were pea shooters against battleships. Okay? We got them broadside. Okay, now, because they turned toward us, we were in position broadside. When we fired ours, all of a sudden, I heard the word, "We got one!" It went down just like that. It was a destroyer. Okay, we got the first one. I heard them distinctly say that. Next thing we know, they tell us that 2 went into the midships of the battleship, Favazza. Okay, it blew up like that because what happened was the ammo was above the right midship. There was a 14-inch gun, right, gun mounted, three barrels there, right above it. The ammo locker was right below it, and then you had the fuel bunker right below that. So it split in 2 later on and floated for 2 hours. By this time, okay, not over yet. We started turning now. You talk about zigzagging. Wow. Our skipper had come aboard our ship October 7th. Now this was October 25th. New skipper, October 7th. Had been a former PT boat commander of 12 boats in Guadalcanal. Highly decorated, silver star, bronze star. An excellent skipper. He's a cowboy with a ship. Oh my God, he was, you talk about it, he should have been a racing car driver. He took that ship and we were going like this. We laid a smoke screen now because the remaining cans, there were 4 destroyers, okay, in the beginning. There were 3 that came out after us. They were firing their guns at us. So we have smoke generators on the fantail. We opened them up and we completely obliterated our position. They stopped firing. Okay, at this position now, the Remy was ahead of us with smoke all over the place, and the McGowan was also ahead of us. So they were all doing the same thing, zigzagging out of there. Now, mind you, we came down like this, all in line, but when we got out of there, we were all over the place. So now we don't have any only 1 torpedo left, and that misfired. Okay, so what are we going to do? We hid behind Dinigat Island, one of the 7,000 plus islands. We hid behind the 3 of us to get away because we knew we were no match. And then all of a sudden we watched the show. Here comes Halsey's old battleships coming down now, realizing what a mistake that had been made. Came down high speed now. We could see them firing over the island. And we watched the whole show, and they finished them off. Only 1 destroyer, right? Yeah.
Like seeing about the size of a DFW, I guess. Something about the mirror, but
yeah. I think only 1 destroyer escaped.
Oh yeah, you could see them.
Oh sure, you could.
Yeah,
it's just coming over motion.
And they level off.
It's like 4th of July.
They start down and you can see them.
Fireworks all over the place.
Connect. And when they connected, those big shells like
that, you can see them hit.
Sparks go up.
Yeah.
Then the secondary explode because they would penetrate.
Yeah.
Armor piercing. That's what I was trying
Yeah,
to do.
none of us got hit. He never lost a man on the ship. We never lost a man on the ship. We had him wounded. Curt survived.
Yeah.
You know, and he was wounded mostly by shrapnel from our own ships. Because the Japanese used to come in low, 3 feet above the water, and we'd be firing across, like this. So some of the shells would explode, and the shrapnel would fall on the deck. And we had some of our men, a very good friend of mine, a sonar man, got a piece of shrapnel right through his leg. Yeah, but he survived.
Yeah.
They all survived. Yeah.
We had Victor Terror shells for anti-aircraft, designed to explode within 50 feet of anything metal. So you'd shoot, if you're 50 feet of an airplane, boom, it was the end of the airplane, goodbye.
Yeah.
But if they missed, and many times they did, it would come over your ship eventually, and it would go off within 50 feet of your mast, and that crud is coming down. Tink! Heard that helmet?
That was I think, you know, there was a lot of scary moments that we had, both of us out there, I'm telling you. But I think that was perhaps, that battle was the scariest of them all.
I think my scariest was Okinawa.
Okinawa, yes. Well, I told you about one at Okinawa, when we were on picket duty. That was, picket duty is the worst duty.
Well, there were
we
two
could
of
have.
them. Our first real introduction to the kamikaze, well, we saw some of it, a little bit of it.
Divine Wind.
The Divine Wind was when we went into Luzon. Well, after Iwo Jima, I guess I better tell them about Iwo Jima. Huh? We got rammed at Iwo Jima by one of our own squadron destroyers. I don't know why she didn't like us or something, but she rammed us. Kind of nice little pie-shaped hole in the fantail. That's when our what do you call them? We couldn't drain the water out of our hole, out of our. You just talked about them.
What the,
Handy billies. What's the
yeah,
matter with you?
yeah,
You gotta
yeah,
remember
handy
these things.
billies.
Oh,
oh yeah, you mean handy billies, yeah. That's firefighting equipment,
yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Well,
Gives
anyway,
pressure
our
to
handy
the
billies
water.
didn't work. We couldn't pump the water out. But it was not a disaster. We did do. We were still firing. They came and took us back to or we just went back to the foot of Suribachi. It's known to us as Hot Rocks. Suribachi, and anchored there. And we were, picking these assignments that we were assigned to, shooting assignments. But also a group of us were assigned to go over the shore and get sand in these sandbags, fill up these sandbags to put in the hole so we could get out of there and not sink. And that was tough. That's where you really get to smell the water. We got over there, and I was beside Leo with Ramsey, and we were the guard. We didn't shovel the stuff in. We had machine guns, and Leo, there was a dead Japanese officer laying not too far away, and he had a gun in his holster or something in his holster. You could see it was there. Leo said, "I'm going to get that," and I said, "You dope." Not me, brother. I want to get back home with one souvenir, and that's my skin.
Yeah.
And I wanted it to be whole. And he said, I think he got it.
Yeah.
Anyway, there was a dead Marine over there I saw that just left an indelible impression on him. He was cut right into it. And yeah, a mortar shell must have landed directly on, almost directly on him. And I had our firing position was just off the beach, close enough where they were taking us under mortar fire. And, these mortar shells were dropping, and they could change the elevation of these things very quickly, sort of boom, 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 they're walking them right towards you. But they didn't walk them fast enough because we were smart enough to get the devil out, move and change the range. Anyway, after that, was when we were rammed. We were on a firing mission then. And eventually we went back to Saipan. I thought, man, boy, we're going back home.
Yeah.
We got to go back to the States to get repaired. Yeah, all the way back to Saipan to get repaired. They had, that was a wonder of this war. My God, they brought out, they had these floating dry docks they brought out there to repair ships that were damaged like ours. It's amazing.
Yeah,
What they, our supply line was extended the more we moved closer to Japan.
it got worse.
And
Got worse.
boy, the logistics were fantastic.
Yeah.
I'll have to tell you about logistics. I told Curt this, my cheese story. When we came back for logistics, we would be in a nest of destroyers. There'd be 4 or 5 destroyers that were tiger alongside each other. And they'd take a crew of 8 or 10 from each destroyer, send them over to these supply ships, and they would work 8 hours or so, sending supplies back, supply all 8 of the 5 or 6 of the ships that were in the nest. Okay? So I was in charge, I was only 18 years old, and I was in charge of this group that went over, one time about 8 guys. We got over there and they said, okay, we want you guys to hold the potatoes. Once you're done, you can go back to your ship. potato hole wasn't the nicest place to be. It was dirty and dusty, but
Yeah.
I said, come on guys, let's turn to it and we can go back to our ship. And we did, we worked our tails off. We got those potatoes back out of that hole as fast as we could. It took us about 4 to 5 hours. And then we went up topside, we got on the deck, we stretched out on the cargo nets and relaxing under the stars. Officer came back and said, what are you men doing lazing around back here? Get up forward, we need you up there to, I said, hey, wait a minute, buddy. You know, he was just an officer from the emergency service. I said, wait a minute. I said, we were told, I don't care what you were told, get back there. We hauled the guy up. And they were dropping us down on these levels. Well, this one level we came to, we never saw this before. Were these great big round store cheeses, you know, cheddar cheeses.
Yeah.
And we hadn't eaten anything. Well, we were about to.
Yes.
So we had these big K-bar knives. We attacked those cheeses like they were Japanese. We whacked them, butchered these things. And I had cans of ham, cans of ham. And I cut those and I was getting them with this jelly running out of my hands and a piece of cheese in the other hand, and the officer came down and caught us. I was in charge of this group, I am, sir. He said, well, he said, I gotta know, I'm gonna tell your commanding officer. And I said, wait a minute, pal. And I explained to him what had happened. We'd been told that we were to go back right after we finished the first job we were on. And we hadn't had anything to eat in 10 hours.
Yeah.
You guys haven't eaten anything? I said, no, come with me. Well, he took us into the finest breakfast we'd had in a good long time, I'll tell you, boy.
Wow.
And it was real cutlery and real plates,
Yeah.
real eggs, real stuff. And he said, now will you do it for me? And we said, sure. But the nicest part about it was, you know, there's a heart out there too. When we finished, he said, thanks boys.
Yeah.
And he escorted us up to the gangway, and at the gangway were 2 or 3 of these cheeses that we butchered.
Yeah. That's good.
I wish we'd have butchered a couple more, but anyway, 2 or 3 of these cheeses we butchered, some grand hams. He said, you tell your OD, your officer of the deck,
Yeah.
that's for the enlisted men. We were here because we had, you know, macaroni and cheese, something like that, something we'd never had on a boat ship. It was quite a treat.
I'll go back to Iwo Jima. We didn't do any shore bombardment like he did. We had, our job was to escort the aircraft carrier, Saratoga. It's an older aircraft carrier, but a good one. The captain on that ship and the captain of our ship were classmates at Annapolis. So we ate very, very well. And so this day I was walking up the deck. We were at Iwo Jima and they were sending the planes off to bomb Iwo Jima from the aircraft carrier. Yeah. So they just finished their day's work and they were getting ready for the next day. And of course they refueled all the planes on deck. So they'd be all set for their sorties the next morning. I was walking up the deck, and I think it was probably getting ready for chow, okay, for the evening chow. And all of a sudden, I looked out that way, over the water. I had been a lookout in the ship. I saw this plane coming in 3 feet above the water. It was I've forgotten what it was, but it was a Japanese plane coming in toward the Saratoga. I yelled up to the bridge. No, general quarters didn't sound it. We didn't pick it up. Because the radar sometimes
It's under the radar.
yeah, ineffective when they were coming over that low, and they knew it. So, okay, that one went right into the carrier. Just erupted. It landed on the deck, and oh my God, So I yelled up, the general quarters was sounding, I hated that sound. So I ran to my battle station, secured forward, that was my battle station, all forward. Officers' quarters and chief's quarters and everything like that. And crew's quarters reported to the bridge, are all secured. Next one came in. Second one, same thing over the water. We shot that one down. The third one came in, we shot that one down. Okay, but the first one did the damage. 300 men were killed. Boom, just like that. Well, she was listing. She was listing like this. Wasn't, you know, from, so we went alongside her. And being a firefighter, I was asked to help fight the fire. She said, we don't need any help. We can fight our own fires. Thank you. So put the fires out. But she was listing. She could do 15 knots. So we decided, well, we didn't decide, the commander did of the ship. We took her back to Ulithi. I got out of the Iwo Jima. And the next day, okay, the next morning, all of us were dressed in our best, lined up along the deck to watch the burial of 300 sailors. I get still, I fill up when I think about it. It was awful. They put a 54-pound projectile. Okay, it's a 5-inch shell. Yeah, dying, and they put them on a chute and they go down into the sea.
It's a ceremony though,
Yeah,
it's a blessed ceremony. It's,
but
you can't refrigerate them, you know, you can't keep them.
yeah,
And those boys will never come home.
yeah,
They'll
never,
always be.
always, yeah, very to see. But that never left my mind. I saw it at that time.
Saddest, one of the saddest things I ever saw.
Yeah.
Was
We got back to Ulithi, which was one of the islands where we had a base, and we never went back to Iwo Jima. So our next duty was Okinawa after that.
you didn't go into the Nihan Gulf?
Oh, yes, we did. I'm sorry. Yes, we did.
Yeah,
Yeah, we did. Yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah, we did that.
the Nihan Gulf was a nightmare.
Yeah.
We were fiddling around outside. The big guns were at the entrance to the Gulf, and just bombarding at leisure. We were out there screening this thing. It was pretty lazy duty. And finally they decided we were going ahead of schedule, so we'd go in and bombard the beaches and so forth. Bad choice, bad choice. Because as we went in, I don't tell you, on our starboard side were the mountains.
Yeah.
And these guys had decided, oh well, if we can't hit them with our bombs, we can hit them with our airplanes, but we'll have to fly them into them. Jesus, they came over those mountains like you wouldn't believe it. And boy, they started whacking away at area. We couldn't turn around. We couldn't maneuver or anything.
No, we couldn't.
We had to wait until we got in where it was wide enough so we could turn around and come back out. Yeah, and that was kind of exciting because when we got in there, well, first place going by these guys, geez, they were being knocked over into the water, you know, blown off their ships. They were screaming at us, help me mate, and we could throw them our life jackets or, you know, life rings or something like that, but we couldn't stop, because if we stop, we're gonna jam up the whole stack. Anyway, I think I would have stopped probably, but anyway, I felt bad for it. Once we got in there, we turned around, we started back out, and I decided to leave 2 destroyers in there. Just I don't know who the other one was, but I knew who one of them was ours. And we were in there all night long, we're down by a river. And we were told not to start anything. You know, we were directed not to start a battle, not these ships or anything like that. They were bigger than we were. So we picked up this service contact, came down the river at the end of the Gulf. Let him go, and he turned, went right up between us. We just let that little guy
Yeah.
slip right between us. But he got out to the end of that strait, the whole United States fleet was out there waiting for him, and boom!
Yeah.
Boy, he was
That
gone,
was
so.
Yeah.
And he was very pleased we didn't do anything.
You see, at times we had the
Sometimes the stretch is a better
Australians.
part of Valley, you
Yeah.
know that.
Yeah.
But now we can get on to Okinawa,
Yeah.
or get off of Okinawa, we'll go to Okinawa. Okinawa was my,
Okinawa was something else.
that was
We had,
we spent 128 days of almost constant combat.
really, God, kamikazes. People would ask, "Did you ever see any kamikazes?" How
Yeah.
about almost every day?
Tell us about
Every
how
day.
that experience.
Every
was.
day,
The
every
kamikazes.
day. Sometimes they come out at you 200 at a time.
Really?
400.
Yeah.
400 in the first big attack. 400 kamikaze came out.
And they fly low, and we'd be flying across like that. That's when some of our men got hit with shrapnel from their own ships.
Yeah.
It was unbelievable. And we had the worst duty that you could have. It was picket duty. Call it picket. Okay, you're between, here's the fleet, Japan is over here, you're like here. You're sometimes 25, 50 miles away from your fleet. You have no air cover, no protection from the air, okay? And what you do, you're there for the pilots that are making the bombing runs to Japan and coming back shot up. They know you're there.
Also, they were to notify the combat air patrols, zero them in on the incoming kamikazes.
That's right, yes, exactly. And you could give them fair warning ahead of time too, that way. And some of them would come back pretty well shot up, come down, you'd be doing 30 knots, all right, you see them coming, and you come down, land in the water, about 2 minutes. That's all he had, to get out of the cockpit and in the water. Now, if you were wounded, we had 2 excellent swimmers. I mean excellent. One was an former Olympic swimmer, one of our officers. The other one was number 5 gun captain, number 5 gun, 5-inch gun, Walter Crowley. Walter was just as good as the Olympic swimmer. Those 2 guys were, boom, right in the water, like that. And the plane would be alongside the ship. Sometimes they had to pull the cockpit open, drag the pilot, because he was wounded, out into the water, once we got him in the water. And we had a record. We think it was a record. One day, a pilot came down in the water, the plane was pretty well shot up, got out of the cockpit, and we had the cargo, we had a cargo net over the side, and it's all rope tight. And this officer and the plane, the pilot, walked out of the cockpit onto the wing and over to the cargo net and never got his feet wet.
Occasionally they'd send us
We
out.
bragged about that so much.
Occasionally they'd send us out to relieve somebody who was escorting the aircraft carriers. That wasn't our job, but we'd go to relieve these guys. They'd come back in and get fueled up and logistics, and then back out and relieve us. Kind of interesting. During a kamikaze act, this one guy crashed his plane, but he missed the carrier, and all he had was a little cut on his chin. Well, hang on. Well, how do I know that? Because we had to go back in, and they said, we want you to take this guy back into intelligence. I forgot what the name of the intelligence ship was, but it wasn't very intelligent. Oxymoron, right? Oxymoron is intelligence in the Navy sometimes. But be that as it may, this guy came down. What's he doing? Where was I?
You're talking about this fellow.
How you knew he had just a cut?
One cut.
Oh, yeah. How did I ever get off that? You disrupt me.
It was all Sarah's fault.
Goes with the territory, guys. Yeah.
Just let it go, it'll come to you.
One can't let it go too long. They're taking film up there. What was I saying? Tell me again.
The guy with the one cut who missed the
One
ship.
cut, yeah. So they said, you gotta take him in.
Yeah.
So they put him in a bag, honest to God, a canvas bag. Put the lines across, we put him across with his canvas bag. Took him out of the canvas bag, and he was okay, a little short guy. Big Ed McDermott was a buddy of mine, and he was a big Ed McDermott, 6'7", something like that, 6'8". He said, Dermot, take him back to the bistro there,
Yeah.
where we lock him up. Ed went back with this guy, and this guy started conversing with Ed in perfect English. He'd been educated in San Francisco. Came from there.
Funny, yeah.
So that was kind of an interesting thing.
Yeah.
Then, geez, the kamikaze, they scared the life out of me.
Well,
We,
it's a different time.
at one time,
Very different time.
had two kamikazes coming in on our port side, port bow, and two coming in on our starboard bow. Well, I didn't see the two coming in on our starboard bow, but everybody told me about it. They were scared to death over there too on that side. The ones on the left side that were coming in, I was scared because I saw them, you know, Jesus, they were right on the water. And our gunner got both of them, a 40mm gunner, and he was a little guy. Nobody liked him.
Yeah.
Nobody liked him at all, but after he shot those two guys down, they liked him. You know, one of the, give him the cigarettes or whatever.
Yeah.
Anyway, then another time, the fleet used to gather together to go out to the open sea whenever the big air raids came in, kamikaze raids came in, so they could maneuver and bring a lot of firepower. But we were down the coast, again, on a special mission to Nihan. We were going to run for the mayor of it. We ran down there one more time. And these airplane came right straight down through the middle of this. Everybody was shooting at it too. The whole United States Navy was shooting at it, but they missed it. Came down and he saw us and he turned and he came right straight at us. Right straight at us. And I was backing up fantail there in the cannon. And we lost him in the superstructure. But we were getting information from our talker, who had the headsets on. He said, elevate your guns out to port, or turn your gun out to port side, elevate about 15 degrees, commence firing upon whistle, or command. We did all this, you know, we're excited. All of a sudden he said, commence firing! And this guy flew right through it.
Really?
He flew right through it. He was a dumb, you could see him in there. There was a twin-engine Betty bomber.
Yeah, yeah.
And you could see the guy in the front, the guy in the back. The guy in the front didn't turn around and look at us, but the guy in the back did. He was looking at us, you know. And then that isinglass just shattered.
Yeah.
And they flattened out on the water. Well, they were floating on the surface. And we said, we got the guy, and we were directed to go back. They said, it's navigational
Well, I was
hazard.
gonna say, oh,
Sink
we're
it.
still connected, but Barbara passed.
Yes, but first see if you can get any information from it. So we put out the whaleboat, went over, and sure enough, we got their maps and what information we could. We found out where they were coming from in Houghton, and the B-29s did go up and bomb that area. And I understand they did anyway. And we brought the two bodies on board. I have a picture of it somewhere. And took souvenirs, of course, whatever souvenirs we could find. They gave us a piece of the parachute they had, that sort of thing. And tied the 5-inch shells to their ankles, tossed them overboard. Years later, our executive officer had one of the souvenirs, which is a band the guy had around his head, the pilot. And he was going to bring it to Boston at a reunion, and you know, we were going to bring our artifacts there and show them the guys, you know, and so forth. And he said, look, before I do that, he said, I want to get this, find out what this thing says.
Yeah.
So he took it to the down in Norfolk, Virginia, what is it? It's a professor down there who was Japanese, some school down there. And they found out what it said, the guy's name, what outfit he was with, Special Forces, his rank, the whole 9 yards. And the professor said to Bose, what are you going to do with this? Bose said, well, I'm going to take it up a reunion and show the guys, you know. He said, oh, don't do that. He said, you dishonor this man. He said, give it to me, and he said, I will send it back to Japan and see that his family gets it. Below me. Well, both got sucked into that. But, anyway, he got the name of the guy.
Yeah.
And I forgot it. I have the information somewhere. It would be neat information to have. And, but they were deader than doornails. They've been drilled with 20mm cannons, so we know it was us that hit them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good shot.
And the only other time I felt bad in the war, I didn't feel bad. I forgot how I felt, but it was when I dropped charges on a submarine. Well, these guys sank a submarine or two. We never had the opportunity because we were always short bombardment. But we did get a contact, and it was a submarine. And we dropped charges. And I was the guy that said, here, fire one. And when you said fire one, they'd drop 2 charges off the fantail. Fire 2, then they'd drop 2 charges, fire 2 K guns. Fire 3, 2 K guns, 2 charges. Fire 4, 2 charges. And that was the spread. Because you had a lot of room for error.
Yeah.
And that was the old way of sinking a submarine. The new way was with the hedgehogs.
That's right.
And they were deadly.
They're very
They were
deadly.
deadly. When you drop charges, you get all those explosions in the water. There's a great disturbance in the water, and your sonar picks that up.
Yeah.
Turn your sonar back here and get beep, boop, 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 beep, boop. That's what you get. Which is the submarine, you don't know.
Yeah.
You lose track of it.
Yeah.
But you fire these hedgehogs, and they're in a rack. They're like and they go boom, and all these things go out, and they come down in a circle. And you've got that, you know exactly what the range is out there, so you know you're going to hit that submarine with one of those charges.
Yeah.
And you had to hit a submarine, you had to hit it. And we didn't have hedgehogs.
No. Fortunately.
What do you got, Curt?
Well, one more thing. I have, let's get back to Okinawa, picket duty with the incoming planes, the kamikazes coming in now. We had a similar experience like him. We had one, it was just about getting dark. And this was a twin engine, they call them Betty's, bomber, coming over it. And it was so low, that if I had a potato, I could hit it, you know. It flew right over us. And just as it flew over us, one of the 40mm hit it and caught on fire. This is something like you see in movies. And he knew he wasn't going to make it out to the carriers or the other ships that were going to crash on. So he started to circle like this, and we're firing. We're not hitting. Not hitting. And here I am. I'm up between the number 1 gun, 5-inch gun on the bow, and the number 2, which is underneath the bridge. Number 2, 5-inch. And I saw him, and he's on fire, and he's going to come toward us. I guess his objective was to hit the bridge. And he's coming toward us, and it's like slow motion. I could not move. I was petrified. I was really, really frightened. And I knew if he came in this way, I was going to get, that was it for me. Well, I found out after, but I didn't have any phones on this time. Our number 5 gun captain on the number 5-inch gun on the fantail, the ship, okay, asked permission. This is Crowley again, the great swimmer. He was a gun captain. He asked permission to take manual control of the gun. In other words, take it off radar.
Yeah.
And he positioned that gun, he put a 5-inch shell right through him. And it blew apart.
Yeah, they couldn't go down.
Yeah, a couple fragments of the plane
Yeah.
fell on the bow of the ship, not too far from me. And I was still there. I was shaking. I know I was shaking from it. I was so scared. But nothing, I came away without any injuries or anything like that. The only thing, I lost my hearing on the ship.
Really?
That was concussion gunfire. I got knocked unconscious. When I came to, I lost pretty much
That's when all
all
the
my hearing.
drug used to come down. Because everybody in there, you could see the gunfire, the power
Yeah.
that went up. And,
You're standing right next to it, right?
and
Yeah.
remember that these are 5-inch shells with the
Yeah.
Victor Terra fuses, and they're going over, they're missing, and they're,
Yeah.
so they're going off right overhead. Well,
I was down in my compartment. We both had practically the same bunk. He was on a different ship, of course, than I was, but in the after compartment, top bunk,
Yep,
yeah, on the port side. And I had been down below, and the general alarm sounded. Well, naturally, I'm gonna leave everything that I was doing and fly up to my battle station as quickly as possible. So as I came out of the after deck house, there's the number 5 gun right there on the fantail, was down low because there was a kamikaze coming in on us. Okay, and we were, just as I stepped out the door, 2 guys behind me, the same thing, no cotton in our ear. That was, you didn't know anything about that. And the gun went off. I would say probably 3 feet away from me. I went out.
so we were both wearing hearing aids. Yeah, the
Couple
government
of guys.
surprises to us.
Yep, retrieved me. I was on the deck and I was unconscious. So I went to see the doctor, and of course they didn't know that much about hearing then. They still don't know an awful lot about it. But thank goodness we have something we can hear anyway with.
Yeah.
But the doctor said, oh, that'll come back to you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The guys would be yelling at me,
Yeah.
you know, on the ship to make me hear. So finally, when I got back to the States, I was 20 years old at the time when I got back. So I was 17 when I went. 20 years old, I asked Bill Campbell, one of our officers who was in charge of transportation at that time. We were in Hunters Point, just above San Francisco. And I asked him if I could go over to Treasure Island to see if they could do something about my hearing, because they had the medical facilities over there. So he says, take the command car, which was a little bit bigger than the Jeep. Now, I drove through the streets of San Francisco, no license. No, I didn't get my license until I was 21 after I got out. I drove through the streets and over to Treasure Island, went to see the doctor, they couldn't do anything for me, and came back to the base, and drove in, no problem at all.
I'd like to,
I've been driving since I was,
Yeah.
I think, around 11 years old,
Oh,
10 and 11 years old. I used to warm my father's car up in the morning.
Yeah.
that's not part of the war.
Time out for one more second.
I should take it out, because he lived on a,
We had it as a tribute really to the squadron I was in, because we were 9 ships in my squadron. The first one we lost, we didn't lose any that were sunk, but they were badly damaged. And the first one hit 2 mines off the Philippines. And then one of them was hit by shore battery. Another one was hit with 5 kamikazes. Original 5. The White Sea came alongside to help her out, and she got hit with 1. And blew up back aft. She didn't sink, none of one of them sunk. Every ship in that squadron, save 1, suffered from enemy action. That was the one that was served on, of course.
Yeah. Wow, I know.
But our sister ship, the Leary, had a guy that was shot by a sniper.
Really?
In the Philippines.
From
The guy
shore?
just lifted his rifle and shot him, shot in the air and hit this guy. Didn't kill him, but it hit him. And they also were clipped by a kamikaze. Kamikaze came in on them, and the guy banked in front of their number 1 gun mount, and the tip of the wing hit the, that iron sight that it had up there? Hit that iron sight and broke it off. The guy went in the ocean.
Yeah.
Can you imagine that? Boy, that must have been a comfort to those guys that were in that gun
Yeah,
mount.
imagine that. Wow.
I'm gonna introduce
The
this.
Newcomb actually lost their gun mounts. Their gun mounts were taken right out.
Oh, really? Kamikazes too, right?
And I said I would tell you some of the sordid parts. When that happens, there's pieces of meat adhering to the refuse, and you can't get rid of it. You can't get rid of it. You gotta live with it.
Yeah.
I saw one ship in my squadron, the one that got hit 2 mines, when they opened the, the deck, the hatch to the engine room, and brought these guys out. They were like lobsters,
Cooked.
royal lobsters.
Steam.
Yeah. When the Navy, you get killed in the Navy, it's a tough one.
Yeah.
It's gonna be sinking, drowning,
Yeah.
swimming, sharks.
We suffered something fierce during Okinawa campaign. The Navy suffered approximately about 10,000 casualties a month. More than the Marines and the Army combined.
One thing happened during the Okinawa campaign. We were working with the Longshaw
Yes,
one
okay.
night. And the Longshaw, and we were putting up illuminating fire. The Longshaw ran aground. And I just happened to be on the bridge, and I was on the wing of the bridge when they sent an ATR over to take her off the reef. That's an ATR would be an ocean-going tugboat. Pretty powerful little suckers they were too, powerful engines. I stood there watching this thing sort of leisurely, and I had the headset on. And they got the lines across, and the tug was moving out slowly in order to not yank it off, to take out the slack.
Yeah.
And she almost got there when, boom, a shell exploded right in the middle of them, right between them, between the 2 ships. They're about maybe 50 yards apart. And I knew it had to be shore fire, it had to be.
Yeah.
And I looked over towards the beach. But meanwhile, I was also looking back at the destroyer. He was right there. Boom, right alongside of her, another shell exploded, and then her #1 mount got a shell off, got one fired off, and then she got hit and blew up. Blew her forecastle right off, about 75 yards away. You can imagine that.
Yeah.
And by that time, I zeroed in where that damn thing was. They'd run a gun down during the night, and I had a Polaris right there. Polaris is a great big thing where you can get the bearing.
Oh, yeah.
I got the bearing, and I yelled it up. I had headphones.
Yeah.
I gave it to the guys in the mount,
Get to see him, I went
and
out.
they took the gun. They got the gun.
Wow.
The whole United States fleet got the gun.
Yeah.
There's nothing left.
Nothing left of those guys. Well, they got a destroyer.
See, you saw some things that I didn't, and I saw
Larry
things that he
Kellerman,
didn't too.
or one of my buddies, was on the whaleboat, went over to pick up survivors. And the one guy got out of the water. The guy had, his leg was just hanging, just in shreds.
Yeah.
But the guy was laughing. He said, well, you guys, I guess I'll never do 20 now. But I'll be back home before you guys are. But I wouldn't want to go home that way.
No.
But he was in shock.
Yeah.
It was awful to see some of these guys in shock. We had 24 guys, 21 or 24, some number, that was taken off our ship. And it was called shell shock, but it's really, you know what it really is. Nervous breakdown.
We had the same thing. We only lost 2. We had one fellow underway, climb up the
Well, you
mast.
were always out, you didn't get in the shore bumper.
Yeah.
You were out sinking submarines and
Oh,
battleships.
oh. But we had one fellow climb up the mast, which is a no-no underway because they're like this. And we sent 2 fellows up the mast to get him down. We finally got him down. We transferred him to a hospital ship, no, to a bigger ship. And they in turn, I guess, took care of him. And another fellow that jumped off the stern of the ship, the screws. We were doing 25 knots, I'll never forget it. He jumped into, that's a big wake. He jumped off into that, but he never got hit. And we saw him floating, and the captain, we were right around, picked him up, we transferred him. He came from Long Meadow, Massachusetts.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I remember, the machinist made 2nd class. Walter Trudeau was his name. Yeah, I remember. But that's the only time we had anyone go berserk on the ship. But for good reason.
We had a fella, he was a troubled guy. He was, the officers would say, okay, listen, Rodriguez, we're gonna put you on report. Oh, you are? What are you gonna do to me? Sending me on a destroyer in the Pacific and leave me out there with, go ahead, I don't care if you put me on report me. He could care less.
Yeah.
And he was a real nut.
Yeah.
You know, we had a brig on the ship,
Yeah.
the jail, okay? It was a ship fitter's cage. And some of the men, 1 or 2 of them be in there, and you're supposed to be on bread and water, okay, for a couple of days. Well, they ate better than we did in there, because the guys used to bring them food down from the galley and feed them, because there was no guard down there, they were just locked up. They got the food into them, and they ate, wow, they came out, I guess, weighing a few pounds more when they went in.
Well, anyway, let me tell you what we did. When we were bringing stores on board, it was just like the cheese story. We'd steal the stuff we liked. And that would be fruit salad.
I know it's just
Not spam. We hated it.
Oh,
Spam was a different,
never to this day have I.
Yeah.
No.
and, well, we used to get a lot of the officers' food. You know, they had chicken, bone chicken,
Yeah.
little cans. And we need to eat that right in front of them. Hey, that's officers' food. Yeah, well. It's my food now. You know?
I'll tell you this though, you probably come back, you know. I know we're gonna quit in a few.
No, I was gonna offer any of you a cold drink, you've all been
Okay.
talking so much. Could I offer you a cold drink?
Would you care for a cold drink?
Yeah, that's fine, sure.
Sure thing.
Water, I
Yes,
guess.
that'd be
Thank
fine.
you. Thank you.
What we would do is, we had segregation on the ship. The blacks had their own section. They were the officers, what do you call them, mess cooks or something like that. And they would set the table and take care of the food for the officers. One of them I befriended on the ship, and I'm glad I did, because when we were up north,
Yes, it doesn't, you don't feel.
up toward Russia, boy, it was hard. We had gone from the South Pacific in 3.5 days up to the Kuriles. That's the island north of Japan, okay, just below Russia. And we bombarded the canneries, we destroyed their fishing cannons, that was a source of food. And we met some of their boats, their wooden boats, the 50 caliber machine guns on them. And one we got too close to and they opened up on us, we didn't know this. We found out very quickly. One of them opened up on us and we all hit the deck. I remember it very distinctly, it came out, and they were pretty good sized boats, fishing boats. Well, it took us a lot of rounds. What we did, we took care of them. We had what they call grape shot. It's a 5-inch gun, explode above it, drop shrapnel from the shot. And we silenced them pretty quickly. And then we set to destroy them, but it wasn't easy to sink them because they were made of wood. We really had to put some good shells in the right places into them. Well, one of the destroyers got 6 of those boats.
One of the foods that
We
we
got
got
one.
a lot of
I just one more. We had
No more.
this camaraderie among sailors. You don't have it in any other branch of the service. Right? Yes. We have such camaraderie when you get together. It's like we've known each other all our lives.
Yeah.
You meet somebody like, I just met him not too long ago. And wow, the Navy, that's the way the Navy is.
Our reunions. We're the family.
We're the family, that's right, we are a family. We always took care of our own.
The early reunions were wonderful. When we found somebody with it was like getting a pearl out of an oyster or something. But then that leveled off because we only had so many people on board ship, only so many people we could find. And then it started going down the other way. And that's when it got tough. Pretty soon we had more widows coming to the reunions than guys. You know. That's a fact.
How would you say your lives today have been affected by your experiences?
I think I grew up quite a bit. I sure,
Fast.
I wasn't matured greatly, but it was affected by the fact that it sent me to college on the GI Bill, and that's what I got. I promised my mother that I would finish high school when I got back, which I did. Then the next thing she got after me was to take advantage of the GI Bill, and I finally did, and it's given me a good life. And I had organized our first reunion, and that did a great deal for me. I have a great love for the guys I served with, immense love, great respect. I'm not a hero, son, but I served with a lot of them, and I tell everybody that's a fact of life. I served with a lot of them. I saw them do things that were unbelievable. Over the side to help a guy whose plane was shot down. Actually, we went over the side to help somebody off the Milken that was blown overboard. You see them flying in the air when they got blown overboard.
Next question.
But, and I tell them, I sure wouldn't want to go into another war, but if I had to, I'd want to go with you guys.
Sure. But we made something
I
of
hope-
ourselves.
I
when we
hope
came out.
that this kind of thing gets through the kids, because I detest what's going on over in Iraq.
Yeah.
I detest it.
Yeah.
I hate it.
Oh, I do too.
And I think there's got to be another way than shooting each other. 4,000 of our boys have gone down, and I read it in the paper every day, and I just hurt. I hurt when I see that.
Last question, do either of you have any regrets?
I mean, have you served in the service?
I have regrets, but not related to the Navy.
Okay. That's fair.
Well, you know, if the war had happened a little bit later, I don't know whether I would have gone on to college. Probably finished high school already. So I was an honor student in high school. But when the war came along, I wanted to serve just like anyone else. But I think it was a good thing for me, because I had an aunt that encouraged me to go to college. Finish high school and go to college, and I was make something of myself, which I did. And many of the World War II fellows coming back did just that.
All those wonderful things happened to me. Just think, if I hadn't gone to college, I wouldn't have met my wife. Now, that's a neat thing that happened to me. Her too.
Me too. Me too. Same thing.
You met his wife in college too?
And,
Yes.
but I've always been proud of the service. But our people, every one of them, speak of the current wars that have occurred since World War II. They say, you know, that's awful. World War II had to be fought. It was a war that had to be fought.
It was the war to end all wars.
No ifs, ands, or buts about it. It had to be. Somebody had to put this guy Hitler in his place,
Oh, yeah.
which they did in a hole in the ground.
Oh,
But
yes. Yes, they
gee, this thing is going on in Iraq, and how we can go in and attack a sovereign country like that, I just don't understand it.
Yeah.
What happened to my country?
If there was another war that had to be fought in the future, would you be pro for that? You would be with it, right?
I'd have to be,
Under the same circumstances as World War
I
II.
would question it, I still wanna know why.
Mhm.
Why isn't there another way?
Yeah.
Don't you think,
And there
you
should
think in the Iraq war that there wasn't another way? There certainly was. I mean, this guy Hussein even offered
Yeah.
to talk to President Bush.
I also have one last question. What is your view on the Japanese today? Do you learn to forgive? forget, or do
Okay,
you
after the
have-
war,
Mhm.
after college, I worked for a company. It was an engineering company, they built ground-based simulators. And eventually, and they became very popular. And I got into that job just right on the threshold of a change from analog to digital computers,
Right.
and from propeller to aircraft.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Threshold to hit,
Yeah.
right?
Oh yeah.
And about that time, the company had licensed a company in Japan to build a certain level of ground simulator.
Really.
Okay. My boss called me in, and he was the boss of engineering.
Mhm.
He says, Bob, I want you to set up a program for these guys. We got several of their finest engineers coming over. And we said we've got to put on a learning program for them. They'll be over here several weeks. I said, what? Hell, you got the wrong guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not me. You don't pick me. He said, why not? He said, that was in a war. He said, well, someday the war's got to end, Bob. And I said, well, maybe for you, but it hasn't ended for me.
Really.
So I went home, and I said, Shirley, we may have to change jobs.
Yeah.
So she said the same thing, the war is over. I went back the next day, and Dow came to me, and he said, have you thought it over? And I said, well, I'm still thinking. And I'll see you this afternoon, I'll have an answer for you. And finally I decided, yeah, I guess I better do it. Well, they came over, and meanwhile I'd worked out a program. And they were good, they were brilliant,
Yeah.
bright engineers. They asked good questions. Not very well because you couldn't speak good English.
Right.
That's okay, I didn't speak any Japanese.
Yeah.
And I had to enunciate every word. It was a very slow process. Enunciate every word and repeat myself so that they understood. I wanted to make sure everybody understood. Everybody understand?
Yeah.
And they got through that with flying colors. They were great guys.
Really.
And so that changed my mind about them. Then General Sewell came over. And General Sewell had been a Japanese fighter pilot who flew off of Wake Island. And he came, he was retired from the Japanese Air Force, head of the Japanese Air Force. And they hired him as a consultant, if you would. So he was going around to all the different divisions and so forth. And they called me and they said, can we bring him up to your office and have you chat with him for a while? And I said, yeah, sure, bring him up. He came up, and we sat there, we chatted quite a bit. His command of the English language was not very good, but he had a couple of aides who spoke English fairly well. They understood English and so forth. And they would act as, intercom for him. And anyway, as we're sitting there, my daughters had made a little thing for me out of my ribbons sitting on my desk. We should have put it in the drawer. And he said, you in World War? And I looked at the marketing guy that had brought him up to my office. He said, tell him. And I said, yes, I was in World War. You Pacific? I said, yes, I was in the Pacific. And he said, Navy? And or something, maybe. And finally he said, we got around to, did you see any of our ships? And I mentioned the one you guys sunk, the Fuso. But I called it Fuso. And he didn't quite get that.
Yeah.
And his aides looked at me and they said, Fuso? Fuso! And I said, I guess so. And he understood that. He said, oh,
Yeah.
Fuso sink! I said, that's right, one of our guys got it. He said, well, maybe you chased me back to Saipan. And I said, well, maybe we did. But he went back to China or Japan, rather. Then more recently than that, about 3 years ago when I went out to Texas, I was invited to go out there and attend be part of a seminar on the Battle of Leyte Gulf, particularly on Surigao Strait. That's where I met one of your shipmates.
Oh, you did?
Told you that. I showed you his picture the other day.
Yes, I know you did.
No fair. I'm supposed to be the one with the bad
Oh,
memory.
your side.
Anyway, out there they had brought a Japanese fighter pilot. Of course, he was from World War II, and he was no spring chicken either. So, and he had an interpreter with him because he spoke no English. His wife and granddaughter were with him. His granddaughter spoke English very well. Nice people. My wife spent a lot of time with them. This man flew as a guard for the kamikazes. It was his job to protect the kamikazes until they got to their target.
Right.
Then he didn't protect them anymore. They were on their own.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you remember this, but you know, the Japanese also had another aircraft. It was called a Baka bomb. And it was mounted underneath a bomber and dropped. It was like a glider, short wings and so forth.
Flying
But
bomb.
Baka bomb, B-A-K, and Baka means stupid, like the Japanese. Stupid bomb. Stupid guy flying it.
Oh yeah, Baka.
And
Yeah.
they would fly these, and the twigs. Did the twigs get hit with the Baka bomb?
That's right.
The twigs got hit with the Baka bomb, she sank like a broken bottle.
Wow.
And anyway, he went back to Japan. And he felt so badly about these boys, Japanese boys that had given their lives for nothing. Absolutely nothing. And you've got to imagine, these guys were trained. You don't close your eyes. You fly your plane into that target, and you don't even close your eyes. Because if you do, you're not going to hit it. Can you do that? Can you? I couldn't do that. My country couldn't make me do that.
No way.
And my country wouldn't make me do that. But they made them do it.
Yeah, they did.
And he was a very, very nice man. I could talk to him through his interpreter, and we talked that way quite a while.
Do you feel like the war is over now?
It's over for me now.
Yeah.
But the current one isn't.
Yeah.
I don't see any need for it.
Yeah.
Vietnam, I don't see,
No.
I felt so sorry for the Vietnam veterans.
Me too. Yeah.
They come back, every once in a while I see a Vietnam veteran.
You sure?
He looks like
That's
a
all right.
bum on the streets.
Yeah.
Emotional. I shouldn't have the people.
No. Never.
There's got to be a better life. And I hope you guys realize that. And I hope you guys make it happen. Well, my name's Bob Chantler, and I was a sonarman 3rd class on board the USS Haywood L. Edwards. I was a plank owner, and the only ship I was ever on.
Okay, my name is Curt Houghton. I was on the USS Melbourne, DD 680 during World War II. I was a fireman 1st class. on board the ship.